So today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about a 1943 film called Maria Candelaria by director Emilio Indio Fernandez. Now if you haven't seen my previous video, you can always check that out. So in the last video I talked briefly about two styles of Mexican filmmaking of the Época de Oro, the golden age of Mexican cinema from the 1930s to 1950s. The director is Emilio, aka El Indio Fernandez, and he had quite the, he led a pretty unusual life, and much of this according to him. He grew up in Mexico in a time period of the Mexican Revolution, and as a kid he was running around with his, he was following his dad, who was a revolutionary soldier, with his mom. He ended up becoming a soldier himself, eventually landing himself in prison. And according to him, according to El Indio, he ended up escaping and ultimately ended up here in the United States. Is in Los Angeles, and he meets a bunch of expats. Some of them include Dolores del Rio. He becomes an actor, an extra, and he is encouraged to learn all about filmmaking so that he can bring that back to Mexico. His goal was to return back. So anyway, he ends up back in Mexico and he has to start all over again. He works as small bit parts as an actor. A few years into that, he's already directing, which incidentally one of his first films was called Flor Silvestre with Dolores del Rio, who had already previously met. So this movie specifically was in 1943 again. So the movie centers on Maria Candelaria, played by Dolores del Rio, and Lorenzo Rafael, played by Pedro Armendáriz. In the previous video I had mentioned that these classical Mexican films of that golden age were probably not going to include a lot of the major actors at the time. Well, that's actually false, because in this movie it starred two people who were already pretty established actors of the time. Dolores del Rio and Pedro Armendáriz. They play these indigenous people that live in Chinampa before the Revolutionary War, and Maria Candelaria is basically shunned by the other indigenous people of the village. Why? For the only fact that supposedly Maria Candelaria's mom was a sex worker. So throughout the movie they are dicks to her. And then there's this, so she has this conflict that she has to be able to live her life, you know, amidst all this hostility that the villagers are imposing on her. And to boot, there's this indigenous woman who's also in love with Lorenzo Rafael, there you go, that's how you say it. So she pretty much makes every effort to make Maria Candelaria's life a living hell. And then there's another jerk who's called Don Damian, who plays, he's like a charro, and he's very vindictive and pretty much racist against the indigenous community, even though he's pretty paisa himself. So Maria Candelaria owes him money, so she has to contend with this, you know, jackass as well. And then there's this other side story that comes up that also adds to the tragedy. There's this painter that meets Maria Candelaria and is very interested in painting her. So again, in the text, The Classical Mexican Cinema by Burge, in it Burge describes El Indio Fernandez's desire to focus very much on Mexican themes and Mexican landscapes, which I would argue that they are visible. I'm not sure what themes he was trying to capture, maybe to portray the indigenous community in a very stoic manner, but honestly the only two likable people in the whole film were, you know, the characters played by Dolores del Rio and Pedro Armendáriz, and to maybe a small extent the minor players like the painter. This movie did not portray the women, except for Maria Candelaria, in a positive light, because they're all either chismosas or celosas or vindictive. It's interesting to point out that El Indio Fernandez has been accused of stealing a lot of his movie ideas from others. So in the book that I mentioned last time, The Classical Mexican Cinema by author Burge, he explicitly talks about what or how did El Indio Fernandez steal Specifically, Birch talks about this movie, Blue Light, a 1932 film that El Indio supposedly took the whole plot line from. Now, the thing about it is, I don't know how much I would focus on whether or how much he stole, because a lot of, well, I don't know about a lot. I know that there are directors that take a lot of liberties in getting ideas elsewhere. Like one of the notorious ones is the most acclaimed, or one of the most acclaimed Hollywood directors today, Quentin Tarantino, who flat out admits to not only stealing, but he will tell you specifically what movies or what scenes, what exactly did he take. So I wouldn't, how much to focus on that. So one of the interesting things is that, like the Buñuel movie Los Olvidados, when Maria Candelaria came out, it was not met with critical success. It also had to go out and find success outside of Mexico for it to be able to come back to Mexico with already the critical acclaim. So yeah, with that critical acclaim, returns back to Mexico, and now the movie is seen in a different light. Feel free to check it out. It's available on YouTube. It's only so far in Spanish. I couldn't find anything with subtitles, but listen, if you're very interested in checking out the film, I recommend you look it up online. You might have to purchase it online so you can watch it with subtitles. So again, thanks a lot for watching, and see you guys next time.